What happens when Jake Gyllenhaal walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a thoughtful conversation, only to find himself defending deeply personal choices after a surprisingly sharp exchange with Joy Behar? What starts as a casual interview quickly shifts into a tense, uncomfortable moment that leaves the audience unsure whether they're watching a normal celebrity interview or something much more personal unfold live on television. Make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The applause rolled through the studio as Jake walked onto the stage smiling, waving politely toward the audience. He looked relaxed, dressed casually but sharp, carrying the calm energy of someone used to press tours and difficult interviews. Across the table, the hosts welcomed him warmly. "Well, look who finally made time for us," Joy said with a grin, leaning back slightly. The audience laughed. Jake smiled. I know. It's overdue." "You've been busy," one of the hosts added. "Movies, producing theater. It feels like every few months there's something new." Jake nodded. "Yeah, it's been full. Busy in a good way, though." The conversation began lightly. The hosts asked about recent projects, travel, balancing work, and public attention. Jake answered comfortably, joking with the audience, occasionally laughing at himself. "You seem calmer these days," another host said. "More settled." Jake smiled thoughtfully. "I think age helps. You start caring less about proving things and more about understanding yourself." The audience responded with soft applause. Joy tilted her head slightly. "Do you really believe celebrities ever stop proving things?" she asked. Jake laughed politely. "Probably not entirely." "I'm serious," Joy continued, "because sometimes it feels like actors say they've become grounded while still living in this very curated world." A small ripple of laughter moved through the audience. Jake smiled carefully. "Well, fair criticism." "I'm not criticizing yet," Joy said quickly, smiling. "I'm warming up." The audience laughed louder. Jake laughed too, though his posture shifted slightly in his chair. "Oh," he joked. The conversation moved briefly back to safer ground. Jake spoke about creativity and pressure, explaining how difficult public expectations could sometimes feel. "You learn quickly," Jake said, "that people build versions of you in their minds." "That sounds exhausting," one host responded. "It can be," Jake admitted. "You're constantly explaining yourself without actually explaining yourself." Joy leaned in. "But isn't that part of the job?" Jake paused. "To some extent, sure." "No, seriously," Joy continued. "Because I think audiences sometimes feel celebrities want privacy until publicity benefits them." The audience reacted with a mixture of laughter and quiet murmuring. Jake smiled politely. "That's fair to ask." Joy crossed her arms lightly. "So where's the line?" Jake paused for a second. "I think the line is intention," he answered carefully. "You share what feels meaningful professionally, but personal life. You keep hidden?" Joy interrupted. Jake gave a small smile. "Private." Joy raised an eyebrow. "Private is an interesting Hollywood word." A few audience members laughed nervously. Jake laughed softly too, though slower this time. "What's the non-Hollywood version?" "Selective," Joy replied quickly. The audience gave an audible, "Oh." Jake leaned back slightly, smiling but visibly measuring his response. "Okay," he said carefully. "That's fair." One host jumped in. "Joy came ready today." "I always come ready," Joy said. More laughter. Jake tried to shift the mood. "I should have had coffee before this." The audience laughed warmly, easing tension for a moment. Joy smiled. "I just think people are curious because you've spent years being mysterious." "Mysterious?" Jake repeated. "Yes," Joy said. "You give interviews but somehow say very little." Jake nodded slowly. "I think I just try to be thoughtful. Or careful." The audience reacted again. Jake paused. "Both," he admitted. "That sounds exhausting too," Joy said. "It can be." For a moment the conversation softened again. Jake explained how growing older changed his priorities and how public attention sometimes distorted reality. "You realize pretty fast," he said, "that strangers create stories about your life." Joy nodded. "But sometimes celebrities help create those stories." Jake blinked slightly. "How so?" "Well," Joy said, gesturing casually, "you know how entertainment works. Headlines, rumors, appearances, relationships. There's this dance between celebrity and mystery." The room became quieter. Jake smiled politely. "Sometimes stories happen whether you participate or not." "Sure," Joy replied. "But when people wonder about who you are, relationships, choices, public image, isn't some of that invited?" Jake shifted in his seat. I think curiosity comes with the territory. That's diplomatic, Joy said. A few laughs. Jake smiled. You're making me sound like I'm dodging. I'm asking if you are. A louder reaction from the audience followed. One host immediately stepped in. Okay, this got serious. Jake laughed softly. No, it's okay. He paused for a moment. I think what happens is people assume if you don't explain yourself, you owe an explanation. Joy leaned forward. But public figures do owe transparency sometimes. Jake looked genuinely thoughtful. About work? Sure. About authenticity. Jake blinked. What does authenticity mean, though? The audience quieted. Joy answered quickly. It means people trust that what they're seeing is real. Jake nodded slowly. I think what you're seeing right now is real. The audience applauded softly. Joy smiled. No, I mean the polished version. Jake laughed once under his breath. There's always some polish. We're on television. The audience laughed. But I don't think protecting parts of yourself means you're fake. The room went quieter. Joy folded her hands. I'm not saying fake. I'm saying defensive. A few audience members reacted immediately. Jake's expression shifted. Not angry. Not upset. But more focused. He leaned slightly forward. Defensive. Yes, Joy said calmly. Because every answer today sounds like you're protecting yourself from something. The room suddenly felt more tense. Jake paused longer this time. He said quietly, I think there's a difference between protecting yourself and understanding boundaries. The audience applauded lightly. Joy nodded but didn't back down. Fair. But sometimes boundaries become walls. Jake exhaled through a faint smile. And sometimes questions become assumptions. A louder audience reaction broke out. One host widened her eyes dramatically. Okay, Kay. Laughter mixed with nervous applause. Joy smiled. So now I'm assuming? Jake kept his tone calm. I think maybe you're deciding what my intentions are. The audience became noticeably quieter. Joy tilted her head. Well, defend yourself then. The crowd reacted instantly. A mix of gasps, laughter, and whispers moved through the studio. Jake looked briefly surprised before smiling. Defend myself? You heard me, Joy said, smiling but firm. You keep saying boundaries, privacy, protecting yourself. So explain it. Why so guarded? Jake looked out toward the audience for a second, then back toward the table. His expression remained calm, but noticeably more serious now. Because sometimes, he said slowly, people mistake access for entitlement. The room went silent for a beat. The audience immediately erupted into applause. Joy sat back slightly, eyes narrowing just enough to show surprise. Jake continued carefully. I'm happy to talk about work, growth, mistakes, lessons. But there's a difference between being honest and feeling required to explain every private decision to strangers. A few audience members clapped again. Joy crossed her arms lightly. So you're saying audiences expect too much? Jake shook his head immediately. No, I'm saying sometimes public conversation expects people to stop being human once they become public. The room grew noticeably quieter. One host jumped in carefully. That's actually interesting. Joy leaned forward again. But if you build a career on public connection. Jake interrupted gently for the first time. I didn't build a career on access. I built one on acting. The audience reacted loudly. The tension sat heavily in the room as Joy opened her mouth to respond. Jake staying calm but visibly firmer than before, and suddenly the entire conversation felt like it had shifted into something far more personal than anyone expected. But audiences invest emotionally, she said. They watch interviews, they support films, they follow careers for years. So when someone seems distant, people notice. Jake nodded slowly. I understand that, he said. I really do. And I appreciate it more than people probably realize. He paused. But appreciation and access aren't the same thing. The audience gave a small murmur of approval. Joy tilted her head. See, I hear that phrase a lot now, boundaries, privacy, access. Everyone says it. Jake smiled lightly. Maybe because everyone feels watched. A few audience members laughed quietly. Joy gave him a look. You're an actor. Being watched comes with the deal. It does, Jake replied. But I think sometimes people hear public figure and assume that means public ownership. The audience reacted again, softer this time, listening more carefully than before. One host jumped in. Do you think social media made that worse? Jake nodded immediately. Definitely. How? Because people feel closer, he said. Which can be beautiful, honestly. People support your work, connect with stories, feel seen by something you made. He shrugged slightly. But it also blurs lines. Joy leaned in again. Okay, but here's where I push back. The audience laughed knowingly. Jake laughed too. I figured. You actors say, respect my privacy, Joy continued. But then there are magazine profiles, red carpets, carefully chosen interviews, campaigns built around personality. Jake listened quietly. So, Joy continued, isn't some mystery strategic? A few audience members reacted with soft applause. Jake thought for a second before answering. Sometimes. Sure. Joy smiled immediately. Uh-huh. No, really, Jake continued. Of course publicity exists. We promote work. But image exists too, Joy said. Yes, Jake admitted. Image exists. He leaned slightly forward. But image also gets projected onto you. The audience quieted again. What people think you are, Jake continued, sometimes has very little to do with who you actually are. Joy crossed her arms lightly. Then why not correct it? Jake laughed softly under his breath. You ever try correcting the internet? The audience burst into laughter. Even Joy laughed. Fair, she admitted. Jake smiled, the tension easing for a second. I mean seriously, he said. You correct one thing, suddenly there are 10 more stories. One host nodded. That actually feels impossible. It is, Jake said. At some point you stop trying to explain yourself and just try to live. Joy's expression softened for half a second before sharpening again. But some people would hear that and say, easy for a millionaire actor to say. A louder reaction came from the audience. Jake paused. That's fair. The audience quieted immediately. Joy looked mildly surprised he hadn't resisted. Jake nodded slowly. I'm serious, he said. Perspective matters. He shifted in his seat. I'm not pretending my life is harder than other people's. Okay, Joy said, because celebrity complaints can sound ridiculous. Laughter spread through the room. Jake laughed too. I know. You know? Joy asked. Oh, absolutely, he said. Being famous is exhausting. Nobody wants to hear that after working a 12-hour shift. The audience applauded loudly. Joy pointed toward him. Now that answer I like. Jake smiled. But pressure exists in every life, he added. It just looks different. The room quieted again. He continued more thoughtfully. I think what people misunderstand is attention changes the way you move through the world. How? Another host asked. Jake paused for a second. You second-guess things, he said. You wonder what becomes a headline. You wonder what strangers think they know. Joy interrupted gently. But you chose this. Jake nodded. Yes. And that responsibility matters. Yes. So where's accountability? Jake looked at her carefully. For what? For being public, Joy replied quickly. For influence. Jake sat back slightly. I think accountability is real, he said. You should be accountable for behavior. For how you treat people. For your work. But not personal openness? Joy asked. Not forced openness. The audience clapped. Joy sighed dramatically. You are very good at this. Laughter filled the room. At what? Jake asked. Sounding reasonable. The audience laughed harder. Jake smiled. That feels like a compliment and an insult. It's both. More laughter. One host jumped in again. Can I ask something? Because I feel like viewers are split right now. Jake turned toward her. Sure. Do celebrities owe emotional honesty? Jake thought carefully. Yes. Joy immediately leaned forward. Oh, yes, Jake said. I think emotional honesty matters. The room got quieter again. But emotional honesty doesn't mean public confession. A few audience members applauded. He continued. You can be real without narrating your whole life. Joy nodded slowly. Explain that. Jake looked toward the audience briefly. If I say I've struggled, that can be honest. He shrugged lightly. If I choose not to explain every detail, that doesn't automatically make it dishonest. The audience murmured approvingly. Joy considered it. Okay, she said slowly. That I actually understand. Jake smiled slightly. But, she added quickly, people still feel like celebrities sometimes hide behind polished language. Jake laughed softly. You really think I'm polished? Yes. The audience laughed loudly. Jake looked out toward the crowd. Guys, am I polished? The audience responded with mixed cheers, laughter, and a few joking shouts. One person yelled, a little. Jake pointed toward them laughing. See? Honest crowd. Joy laughed despite herself. But seriously, she said, turning back toward him. You're careful. Jake nodded. I am. Why? This time the question landed differently. The room grew quieter. Jake's smile faded into something more thoughtful. Because, he said carefully, when people misunderstand you enough times, you become more intentional. The audience quieted completely. Joy watched him closely now. Jake continued. You say one sentence, it becomes 10 headlines. You joke once, someone thinks it's serious. You stay quiet, people think you're hiding. He shrugged slightly. You learn. For the first time, Joy didn't interrupt immediately. So you feel judged, she said. Jake smiled faintly. Doesn't everyone? That got an audible reaction from the audience. Joy looked down briefly, almost considering it. Then she looked back up. But here's the thing, she said. You still seem defensive. A collective "oh" came from the audience. Jake blinked once. Not annoyed. Not angry. Just noticeably more direct now. I think, he said evenly, there's a difference between defending yourself and explaining yourself. Joy leaned forward. Feels close. Not really. The audience reacted immediately. Jake stayed calm. Defending yourself implies guilt, he said. Explaining yourself means someone asked. The room went quiet. Joy smiled slowly. Interesting distinction. Jake nodded. You asked. A wave of laughter and applause swept through the audience. Joy laughed too, shaking her head. You know what? She said. You came prepared. Jake smiled. No, he replied calmly, glancing toward the audience before looking back at her. I came expecting a conversation. The audience reacted loudly again as the tension rose another notch, the other hosts exchanging quick looks while Joy leaned back in her chair with a smile that looked half amused, half challenged, clearly not done pushing yet. Joy leaned back, crossing one leg over the other as the audience applause slowly faded. A conversation? She repeated with a smile. You make it sound like I brought you into an interrogation room. Laughter rippled through the audience. Jake smiled faintly. No, he said calmly. Just maybe a slightly tougher interview than I expected before lunch. The audience laughed louder. Joy pointed toward him. See, now that's fair. One of the hosts jumped in quickly. Can I just say something? I think what's happening here is actually what audiences like. Real disagreement. The audience applauded. Because nobody wants fake smiling for 40 minutes, the host continued. People want honesty. Joy nodded. Exactly. Jake nodded too. I agree. But honesty gets uncomfortable, Joy added quickly. Jake paused. Yes. And celebrities usually hate uncomfortable. The audience laughed knowingly. Jake gave a tiny grin. You think we're delicate? Some of you. Joy replied instantly. Very. More laughter. Jake leaned back slightly. Maybe. The room softened again for a moment. Another host stepped in. I want to ask something because I think viewers at home are probably debating this already. Does fame make it harder to trust people? Jake exhaled quietly. That's a good question. He paused long enough that the room became quieter again. Sometimes, he admitted. Joy leaned forward. Because people want something? Sometimes, Jake said. Not always. He spoke carefully. I've met incredible people through this work. Honest people. Then he shrugged. But yes, you also learn pretty quickly that attention changes relationships. The audience listened closely. How? The host asked. Jake thought for a second. You wonder why someone's interested. The room got noticeably quieter. You wonder if they know you or know the version of you they've seen. Joy's expression shifted slightly, less combative now. That sounds lonely. Jake looked surprised for a second. It can be. The honesty landed. Audience members murmured softly. Joy nodded once. But then people hear that, she said, and think, poor celebrity, must be hard being rich and famous. A few laughs broke the tension. Jake laughed too. Right. I'm serious, Joy continued. People struggle. Jobs, families, bills. Jake nodded immediately. I know. No, I mean really no? The room reacted instantly. A few people shifted in their seats. One host quietly said, Oh boy. Jake stayed calm. That's fair to ask. Joy watched him closely. Because sometimes actors talk about struggle in this abstract way. Jake nodded slowly. I get that criticism. He paused. But struggle isn't a competition. The audience clapped softly. Jake continued. I'm not comparing my problems to someone working 2 jobs or raising kids alone. He leaned forward slightly. I'm saying being human doesn't disappear because your life looks successful. The room quieted again. Joy folded her arms. But isn't celebrity partly illusion? Jake tilted his head. What do you mean? The perfect image, Joy said. The polished interviews. The nice answers. She gestured toward him. Even now, you're incredibly controlled. The audience laughed nervously. Jake smiled. You keep saying that. Because it's true. He paused. Then, for the first time, there was a little more weight in his voice. Would you rather I lose my temper? The audience reacted instantly. Not loudly. More like a collective inhale. Joy blinked. Well, Jake kept his tone even. I mean genuinely. He spread his hands slightly. You say I'm careful. You say I'm polished. But if I came out here angry, people would say, wow, look how difficult he is. The audience murmured approval. Jake continued. If I'm thoughtful, it's rehearsed. If I'm private, I'm hiding. If I defend myself, I'm defensive. Joy sat back quietly. The audience applauded louder. One host quickly stepped in. That's actually a really interesting point. Jake nodded once. I'm not asking for sympathy, he said. I'm just saying there are assumptions either way. Joy tapped her fingers lightly against the table. Okay, she said after a moment. I'll give you that. The audience reacted with laughter. But, she added immediately, pointing toward him, you still haven't convinced me you're not guarded. Jake laughed softly. There it is. I'm serious. He nodded. Okay. He paused. Yes, I'm guarded. The room got quiet again. Joy looked almost surprised. You admit that? Of course. Jake shrugged lightly. I think everybody is. He looked around the table. You tell me nobody here protects parts of themselves? The hosts exchanged glances and laughed. One of them raised both hands. Absolutely I do. The audience applauded. Joy smiled reluctantly. Fine. Jake continued. I think maturity teaches you boundaries. He paused. When I was younger, I cared more about being understood. And now? Joy asked. Jake smiled faintly. Now I care more about being okay with misunderstanding. The audience reacted immediately. Soft applause turned louder. Joy sat there quietly for a second. That's interesting, she said, more thoughtful now. She continued. I think sometimes I push because audiences feel distance. Jake nodded. I know. And maybe people want reassurance that who they support is real. Jake leaned forward slightly. That part one understand. He spoke more softly now. But being real doesn't mean giving strangers every piece of yourself. The audience applauded again. It means trying to show up honestly where you can. The mood shifted. Still tense, but less combative. One host smiled. This suddenly became therapy. The audience burst into laughter. Joy laughed too. Oh please, I'm not charging anybody. Jake laughed harder than before. You should. The room relaxed for a moment. Then Joy turned serious again. Can I ask something personal? The audience instantly reacted. Jake laughed quietly. You asking permission feels dangerous. Huge laughter. Joy pointed at him. See, you're funny when you stop defending yourself. The audience reacted loudly. Jake smiled but answered carefully. Go ahead. Joy hesitated just enough for the room to lean in. When people criticize you publicly, does it actually hurt? The audience grew quiet. Even the hosts looked interested. Jake looked down briefly. For the first time all interview, he didn't answer immediately. Then he looked back up. Yeah. The room stayed silent. Yes, he repeated quietly. Of course. Joy looked genuinely surprised by how direct the answer was. Jake shrugged lightly. I'm still a person. No applause at first. Just quiet. Then scattered clapping slowly built through the room. You read things? Joy asked. Sometimes. You shouldn't, another host joked. Laughter broke the tension. Jake smiled. I know, but criticism sticks? He nodded. Depends. On what? He paused. Whether there's truth in it. That answer changed the energy again. Joy tilted her head. So when I say defensive, Jake smiled faintly. You might not be completely wrong. The audience erupted. Joy laughed loudly. Uh-huh. Jake laughed too. But, he added, lifting a finger, defensive doesn't automatically mean dishonest. The applause returned immediately as Joy leaned back smiling, the audience suddenly more invested than ever, sensing the conversation had crossed into something unexpectedly honest, just as the tension between challenge and understanding started to blur in real time. The applause lingered longer than before. Not explosive. Steady. Interested. The kind of applause that came from people realizing the conversation had shifted somewhere unexpected. Joy sat back in her chair, still smiling. You know what? She said. I'll give you credit. Jake laughed softly. That sounds dangerous. The audience laughed with him. No, Joy continued, pointing toward him. Because a lot of people would have shut down by now. Jake nodded once. I thought about it. The audience burst into laughter. See, Joy said, laughing too. Now we're getting somewhere. One of the hosts leaned in. I actually think this became really interesting because it stopped sounding like celebrity media training and started sounding human. The audience applauded. Jake looked toward her. Thank you. Joy folded her hands together. But I'm still going to say this, she added. You are careful. Jake smiled. Probably. And maybe a little defensive. The audience laughed knowingly. Jake shrugged. Maybe. But, Joy said, softening her tone slightly, I also think people watching probably understand your point more now. That earned another round of applause. Jake looked genuinely appreciative. I think people deserve honesty, he said. I just think honesty gets confused with exposure. The room quieted again. You can be honest without turning your life into public property. Joy nodded slowly. That's actually fair. One host leaned back dramatically. Did we just agree on something? The audience erupted into laughter. Joy laughed too. Don't make a big deal out of it. Jake smiled. I'll take the win. See, Joy said. Competitive. No, Jake replied quickly. Relieved. More laughter. The tension that had been sitting heavily over the table suddenly loosened. Another host turned toward Jake. Do you ever worry conversations like this become headlines? Jake laughed immediately. Oh, absolutely. The audience laughed with him. What would the headline be? The host asked. Jake thought for a second. He looked over at Joy. Jake survives Joy. The room exploded. Even Joy leaned back laughing. Survives, she repeated. Excuse me? Jake held his hands up. Thrives. Better, Joy said. One of the hosts shook her head laughing. The internet's already typing. That got another big audience reaction. Joy turned serious again for a moment. Can I say one last thing? Jake nodded. Sure. I push because people watching ask hard questions, she said. And honestly, sometimes celebrities sit here and give absolutely nothing. Laughter rolled through the room. Jake smiled. That's fair. But, Joy continued, glancing toward him, you gave something today. The audience applauded warmly. Jake looked slightly caught off guard by the compliment. Well, he said after a pause, you asked difficult questions. Joy shrugged. That's my job. And answering them is mine, Jake replied. A soft "oh" came from the audience, followed by laughter. Joy pointed toward him again. You always have an answer. Jake smiled. No, he said quietly. I just try to listen before reacting. That answer landed differently. Calmer. The audience applauded again. One host smiled. That might be the healthiest thing said at this table all week. Huge laughter. Jake laughed harder now, visibly more relaxed than earlier. Joy looked over at him and shook her head with a grin. You know, I thought this was going to be a nice little movie interview. Jake laughed. So did I. The audience burst into applause again. As the segment started winding down, the mood in the room felt noticeably different from where it began. Less combative. More reflective. Joy glanced toward him once more. For the record, she said, I still think you dodge sometimes. The audience laughed. Jake smiled. And for the record, I still think sometimes you assume. Loud cheers and laughter filled the studio. Joy laughed and pointed at him. Fair. One of the hosts clapped once. There it is. Growth. The audience applauded as the show prepared to move on. Jake stood, waving toward the crowd while several audience members stood clapping. Some laughed, some shouted support, and a few could still be heard debating the conversation with each other. You handled yourself well, someone shouted from the audience. Another voice yelled jokingly. Joy almost got you. The room laughed. Jake pointed toward the crowd with a smile. She tried. Joy laughed loudly behind him. Oh, please. As the cameras pulled wider and the segment ended, the energy backstage reportedly felt calmer than viewers may have expected. Staff members joked about how intense the discussion sounded from behind the scenes, while the hosts appeared more amused than upset. Jake reportedly spent a few moments chatting casually near the table afterward, exchanging light jokes before heading backstage, showing no signs of lingering frustration despite the tense moments earlier. Meanwhile, online reaction exploded almost instantly. Clips of the exchange spread across social media within minutes. Some viewers praised Jake Gyllenhaal for staying calm under pressure, calling him thoughtful, patient, and emotionally grounded during tough questions. Others defended Joy Behar, arguing she asked the kinds of uncomfortable questions daytime audiences actually want answered and pushed the conversation past rehearsed celebrity talking points. Some viewers debated whether Jake had truly been defensive. Others argued he was simply protecting personal boundaries while remaining respectful. And plenty of people focused on one moment in particular. "I didn't build a career on access. I built one on acting." The clip sparked debate, reaction videos, and endless comments about privacy, celebrity expectations, and whether public figures owe audiences more openness. By the end of the day, fans were still arguing about who had the stronger point: Jake for defending boundaries, or Joy for challenging celebrity distance. But one thing almost everyone seemed to agree on: it felt real. Messy at moments, uncomfortable sometimes, but real enough to keep people talking long after the cameras stopped rolling. Now we want to hear from you. Who do you think made the stronger argument? Was Jake right to defend himself, or was Joy asking fair questions? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the Star Talks for more real talk show stories.